The Chicago Blackhawks are reportedly open to trading the third overall pick. I'll break down if this is a good move by Kyle Davidson.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Check me out on X at Jack Bushman2, but make sure to go and give a follow to my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way, you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And one final shout out that I got to give here as well goes out to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Make sure to go and visit FanDuel.com right now to get $200 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins before the NBA Finals wrap up. All right, happy Thursday, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's day is going wonderfully. We got some great warm summer weather here in the Chicagoland area, so I hope all of you are enjoying that. Opening things up on the show here today, a real fascinating conversation around a recent rumor from none other than Frank Seravalli on his daily face-off rundown show, suggesting that the Chicago Blackhawks could be open to trading the third overall pick in the 2025 NHL Draft, and in return, they could be looking for a true difference maker that also fits their age range. Here's what Seravalli had to say on his show, quote, "I think everyone has assumed, hey, Blackhawks, young building team, of course you're going to want to take that number 3 overall pick. Whatever player you select there and stack them up with some of the other young prospects that you have in your pipeline, and that may be the case, but they are open and are willing to be aggressive to go out and pursue more immediate help. This number 3 overall pick might not be impacting your team for 2 to 3 years. And it's not that the Hawks aren't willing to be patient. Patience has been Kyle Davidson's middle name as general manager, but at some point, you're also ready and willing to consider alternatives to make your team better in the here and now to help guys like Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar to get going in the right direction, close quote. So a very interesting bit of insight there from Frank Seravalli, peering into perhaps general manager Kyle Davidson's mind. And my first reaction to this, Blackhawks fans, I had 2 immediate thoughts that crossed my mind when I first saw this report. The first one is, I'm a little bit confused about how Kyle Davidson is going about things here this summer, because as I broke down on yesterday's show when going through the Ryan Donato contract extension, by the way, make sure to go and check that out if you haven't done so already, but I mentioned in Scott Powers' write-up that he did for The Athletic on Donato's contract signing, it's not expected that the Blackhawks are going to make a aggressive run for guys like Mitch Marner and Nikolai Ehlers. And personally, for me, I know many Blackhawks fans feel differently about this topic. I understand the hesitancy to go and give 29-year-old Mitch Marner a long-term deal at a super high AAV, right? Considering the position the Blackhawks are in, even though they undoubtedly need help inside their top 6. I do understand them being out at this point in time on Mitch Marner. But a guy like Nikolai Ehlers, a guy like Brock Besser, who I've brought up a couple of different times on the show, I know they don't fit the specific age range that the Blackhawks are looking for, and they wouldn't be guys that come in and really grow together with this young wave of prospects, right? They'd be much older than those guys. But at the same point in time, beggars can't be choosers. And if Frank Seravalli is reporting, at some point in time, you're also ready and willing to consider alternates to make your team better in the here and now, that's Nikolai Ehlers and that's Brock Besser. And you got to spend in order to get good players in this league. So a little bit confused. I understand Kyle Davidson, I think, still is going about this with a patient mindset, right? Because with Seravalli reporting that they're looking for a difference maker that also fits their age range, he's being a little patient and a little bit picky here. And I do think it might be hard to find like an ideal trade candidate, a guy who fits that specific thing they're looking for in exchange for the 3rd overall pick. I think there's going to be a lot of complications in doing that. But the second thought that I had when seeing this when seeing this report from Frank Saravalli, is that they must not really be getting wowed by any of the prospects that they're seeing or looking at for the third overall pick in this year's draft. And to me, if you're not going to go with James Higgins, that's always been my number one guy here at number 3. And according to numerous reports, doesn't really sound like they're all that interested in James Higgins. I would understand if you're not going with James Higgins in this year's draft. I would kind of understanding trading back if you think one of the guys, the interesting part about all of this too is we don't know where the Blackhawks would be trading back to. We don't know if it would be in the latter half of the top 10, if it would be the early to middle teens back in the 20s, or what the trade would look like involving the third overall pick. But I do believe they would only be considering this, Hawks fans, if they weren't absolutely wowed by one of the slew of prospects they're looking at for the third overall pick. As far as whether I would like the Blackhawks to trade back from number 3 overall, it would obviously depend on the return. But if they're not going to be taking James Higgins, which again sounds like they're not expected to do at this point, it seems like Anton Frandel, Caleb Denoyer, and Porter Martone are the 3 that they're really looking at. None of those 3 at number 3 overall necessarily move the needle for me. And I agree with Frank Saravalli, whereas in terms of, excuse me for the word salad, in terms of all of these prospects are probably 2 to 3 years away, right? Frandel, Denoyer, Martone, they're going to need more seasoning, another year of development. And then even then, when they do join on the professional ranks, probably going to need a development year in Rockford unless something crazy happens. So with that kind of being the case, how I feel around these prospects and how from an outside perspective, if the Hawks are open to trading number 3 overall, I'm guessing that's kind of how they feel about these guys. And if they're not going to take James Higgins, depending on the return, I would somewhat understand GM Kyle Davidson wanting to trade back. But for me personally, I would still go and take James Higgins 3rd overall. I think he's easily the most skilled and has the highest ceiling of all the prospects available. But like I said, Porter Martone, I think is a really good fit for the Blackhawks, a skilled and sized winger that also has playmaking and goal scoring skills. Those would probably be the 2 guys at this point that I would like at number 3 if they were going to stay home. But it's going to be fascinating to see if we get any further developments on this front or any more whispers or rumors over the next couple of weeks before the NHL draft opens up next Friday. One last thing I want to leave you all with: 3 teams who are reported to be sellers at this point in time of the offseason. The Buffalo Sabres general manager Kevin Adams is reportedly taking calls on everybody. The Pittsburgh Penguins are reportedly open for business as well, as are the Dallas Stars. However, a report came out today. Doesn't necessarily sound like Jason Robertson is going to be on the table. I broke that down a couple of days ago here on the show as well and mentioned that not only because it would be a trade between 2 teams in the same division, but for multiple different reasons, it would be very complicated for the Blackhawks to go and acquire Jason Robertson, as much as I would like to see them go down that path. Mason Marchment, though, is reported to be available. One thing I didn't mention, though, he has a 10-team no-trade clause, and considering the position the Blackhawks are in, probably going to be at the bottom of the standings again next year. While Marchment's been playing Stanley Cup hockey the last handful of seasons, I do wonder if the Blackhawks are one of those 10 teams in his no-trade clause. However, if they are not, I do think while Mason Marchment won't be a needle mover, while he doesn't fit general manager Kyle Davidson's age range, I do think it would help them reach the salary cap floor. It would be another capable player inside the middle 6. And again, just gives the Blackhawks a little bit more grit and sandpaper and makes them harder to play against, which is something they've been missing for a long, long time as well. So we'll see if they get involved in the Mason Marchment conversations. We'll see if they get involved with the Pittsburgh Penguins for maybe someone like Brian Rust, who reportedly is having his no trade clause come to an end on July 1st. But those are 2 guys who necessarily don't fit the Blackhawks age range. And again, that's why I think there are a lot of complications in trading the number 3 overall pick if that's what the Blackhawks are looking for in particular. One player that does make sense, and I'll be talking about this man on tomorrow's episode. Make sure to keep your eyes out for that, It's J.J. Peterka from the Buffalo Sabres. The Blackhawks are rumored to have already been interested and been kicking the tires to see what the asking price is for Peterka from Buffalo. I'll be talking about the Blackhawks and the odds that they make a run for J.J. Peterka on tomorrow's episode. But there are my first thoughts on reports from Frank Saravalli that the Blackhawks' third pick in the 2025 NHL Draft could be in play. If we get any more developments on this front over the next week, I'll make sure to break them all down right here on Locked On Blackhawks. But coming up in just a moment, I'll dive into segment 2, which is Roger McQueen's 2025 NHL Draft Profile. But first, real quick, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. And I didn't pull up this FanDuel ad, so I'm doing myself a little bit of a disservice right now. I need to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs, we got a do-or-die Game 6 tonight for the Indiana Pacers out east. Huge battle. Can the Indiana Pacers force Game 7? But every single night of the NBA postseason delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot from Tyrese Halliburton or a breakout player like we've seen Jalen Williams in these finals, there's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now. And FanDuel makes it so easy to stay in the game, both before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have way more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And don't miss out on the incredible offer that FanDuel is giving right now. $200 worth of bonus bets you can get if your first $5 bet wins. All you got to do is head on over to FanDuel.com and claim your $200 worth of bonus bets today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Before I get into segment 2, just a reminder to be on the lookout for Victor Eklund's 2025 NHL Draft Profile dropping tomorrow, as well as a discussion around whether the Blackhawks can go and nab J.J. Peterka from the Buffalo Sabres. Segment 2 on today's show, though, we got to keep the NHL Draft Profiles rolling here as we're just 8 days away from the action beginning. And as a reminder, I've covered a slew of prospects now at this point. Michael Misa, Matthew Schaefer, Porter Martone, James Higgins, Anton Frondel, Caleb Denoye, Brady Martin, and most recently, Jake O'Brien. Make sure to go and check out those shows to get the full scoop on each and every one of ththese top prospects in the 2025 draft class. Today, though, as I mentioned, going to be getting into 18-year-old center Roger McQueen, big 6'5", 192-pound forward, played for the Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL the last 3 seasons and turned 18 back in October, by the way, on October 2nd. So one of the older players in the entire draft class in 2023-24. His second year in the W, he tallied 51 points, 21 goals, and 30 assists in 53 games. Also had a nice showing for Team Canada's U17. Had a nice showing for Canada at the U17s. Everyone was excited about Roger McQueen coming into his draft year, but unfortunately suffered a spinal/back injury that forced him to miss a majority of the season. Wound up playing in only 17 regular season games, tallying 10 goals and 10 assists for 20 points. Was able to return for Brandon in the WHL playoffs, but unfortunately they got bounced early in 3 games, and Roger McQueen tallied only 1 goal and no assists. As far as the rankings go, really interesting to look at the rankings here on Roger McQueen, because I think he's one of the most, there's a lot of split opinions on Roger McQueen, especially with the back injury and coming after a year of Caden Lindstrom having a back injury, and he hasn't played a game since being drafted, right? Teams are a little wary, a little bit hesitant about Roger McQueen. So it's really interesting to see kind of the split rankings between some of the top scouts and analysts in the industry. Elite Prospects has Roger McQueen ranked 5th. Bob McKenzie has him ranked 7th. Craig Button also has McQueen ranked 5th, but then Tony Ferrari has him ranked all the way down at 17th. McKean's Hockey has him ranked 12th. Chris Peters has him 10th. Daily Faceoff has him 12th, as well as Dauber Prospects. And then the Hockey News rounding things out, has him at number 6. So the hockey news, Craig Button, Bob McKenzie, and elite prospects all have him between 5 and 7, while the rest of these scouts and analysts have him somewhere between 10 and 17. So it's going to be fascinating when things get going for the NHL draft to see when Roger McQueen's name is going to get called. But diving into his strengths and weaknesses, first thing that stands out undoubtedly about Roger McQueen is, well, he's 6'5" and he plays a skill game. So that's definitely noteworthy. And scouts, NHL scouts absolutely love a player who can play a skill game, can be a playmaker and a goal scorer out there, while also having some jam to go along with it. And that's exactly what you get out of Roger McQueen. And I think he has a pretty well-rounded skill set for the most part. Like, he's a strong shooter, can blow it past opposing goaltenders on the power play, really good power, and a quick release. One of the quickest releases in this draft class. I really believe his goal scoring is going to translate very well to the next level. And then he's a solid playmaker as well. He moves the puck pretty efficiently. For a guy who's 6'5", he fares better in transition than I think most people would expect. And he is a capable puck handler as well. He's not a dazzling dangler like some of the other guys that I've covered. But again, for being 6'5", he's better than I think a lot of people would expect, as well as in the skating department. I think he's not only, he's just a good skater overall. Like, he's not one of the elite skaters in this draft class, but 6'5". His top speed is really good, and he's got very powerful strides. When he gets going, he's got a full head of steam. It takes him a little bit to get there. The acceleration isn't the best, but when he does get going, like I mentioned, Roger McQueen can produce in transition. So I really like that about his game as well. And I think he's a savvy player in tight spaces, along the boards, in front of the net. And this goes along with his stick handling and his puck control, right? He's a prospect who, a lot of these players who go high in the draft, when they do have size, they're still naturally more of a skill player. But I think Roger McQueen really blends both of those things very, very well. And he's got soft hands, and he uses that to make nice moves in front of the goaltender to finish off in tight, or make a nice move when he's got a defender draped all over him to get the puck on over to a teammate. Very capable in tight spaces and along the boards and in battles. And then he's also got a very solid compete level, right? Like, he's not afraid to throw his body around. He knows that's an advantage for him, knows how to leverage his size and his strength too. Pretty strong kid. I think there's still another level for him to get to, but already right around 200 pounds. Once he gets up to, 210, 215 in the NHL, can be an absolute bull, but is someone who will go out there and finish his checks. Also makes an effort on the back check, 200-foot player, does the little things really well, and I like that about Roger McQueen also. As far as his weaknesses go, or things he needs to improve upon, number one, not really his fault, but the injury concerns are always going to cause question marks around him going into this year's draft. Also, while he is a good skater for a player of his size, and I think just a good skater in general, he's not a blow past you skater, and he's definitely going to have to work on his acceleration to take his game and what he finds success at right now and translate that over to the NHL, because everyone's faster in that league, everyone's stronger, and McQueen's definitely going to have to get a little bit stronger to be as good of a transition player as he's been these last couple of seasons. I also have some question marks about his playmaking, and when you don't have that special level of playmaking or passing or vision and don't have that top level speed, there's some questions about what the upside is going to be for Roger McQueen. And again, I do think he still needs to gain a little bit of weight and be more physical consistently to maximize the type of player that he wants to be in the NHL. But as far as my NHL comparison or the upside that I see for Roger McQueen, I think he's very likely a middle six forward that can provide you both with some offense and some jam. I do have some question marks about whether he's going to be a center iceman, just because, again, he doesn't have that speed. He doesn't have special playmaking abilities. He is someone who likes to have the puck on his stick and work with it, but I don't know if that's going to be a dominant trait of his at the next level. So I do wonder if he ultimately gets moved over to the wing. But as far as the comparisons go, I've seen Jordan Staal, I've seen Kirby Dach, interestingly enough, and I do think there's a little bit of Roger McQueen and Kirby Dach, although Roger is the bigger of the two players and I think was the more physical of the two at the junior level. I've seen Quentin Byfield. I think Tage Thompson is kind of a natural one, considering there's not many 6'5" forwards. A lot of similarities to Dean Letourneau from last year's draft class as well. And by the way, it would be very interesting if the Boston Bruins elected to go and select Roger McQueen to add him alongside Big Dino. But the two that I really see, both of these guys are wingers. And I do think that Roger McQueen has the chance to be more of a puck carrier in transition than both of these guys are. But I think Evander Kane and Val Nichushkin are pretty similar comps for Roger McQueen. Again, I think he has a chance to be a better skater and playmaker / puck carrier than both of those guys, but the success I really see Roger McQueen finding is in and around the net and with his goal scoring abilities. And that's kind of what I see out of both Evander Kane and Val Nichushkin. Not guys who are necessarily known for their speed or their playmaking or even their defense, but they're jam guys that can play inside the middle six and score goals and be serviceable enough offensive players. That's kind of the same mold that I see Roger McQueen in. So that's kind of where I'm going with my NHL comparison. I do think Roger McQueen, there's a lot to like about him, but I don't think the injury scares are enough to have him go after both Jake O'Brien and Brady Martin, who I know those are two guys whose stocks have been rising over the last couple of weeks. I'd be very shocked if Roger McQueen gets selected before both of those guys, even though there is a lot to like. The injury concerns, the lack of speed, the lack of playmaking. I think that's enough where Roger McQueen probably goes somewhere between 8 and 11 in the 2025 NHL draft. But that takes care of my breakdown on Roger McQueen's 2025 NHL Draft Profile. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I wrap up today's episode, still have to get into some updates on prospects whose rights expired with the Blackhawks. Real quick, just want to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For segment 3, Blackhawks have had some tough decisions to make on a handful of prospects whose rights were set to expire back on June 1st if they did not sign them to their entry-level contracts. And that's precisely what happened to Marcel Marcel, Milton Oscarsson, Victor Stjernborg, and Alex Pharand just a couple of weeks ago. I know this was something that I mentioned leading up to the June 1st deadline when the Blackhawks had to make a decision on whether to give these guys entry-level contracts or not. And if they didn't, their rights were set to expire and they were going to become unrestricted free agents and elect to take their talents elsewhere. Like I mentioned, that's what we saw happen with those 4 players. But not really all that surprising. This wound up being the case. I think really the only one who could have gotten an ELC was Alex Pharand. But even at that point, I'm not really surprised to see him not. This is just the result of the Blackhawks having such a deep prospect pool and having so many bodies in the pipelines since Kyle Davidson has taken over as general manager. Maybe we see one of these guys sign an AHL deal with the Rockford Ice Hogs, but I would say that's pretty unlikely at this point in time. But breaking down each of these 4 players, Alex Pharand was a 4th-round pick for the Blackhawks back in the 2023 NHL draft, had 59 points, 17 goals, and 42 assists. As an alternate captain for the Sudbury Wolves this past season, 6'3", 192-pound winger. If he ever is going to make it to the NHL, which I think is an unlikely chance of that, hence why the Blackhawks didn't give him an ELC, it would be as a 4th-line grind type of guy with some good size. Don't really think the Blackhawks are missing all that much here, but Pharand is still only 20 years old, likely going to sign an AHL contract if I had to guess. Victor Stjernborg, really interesting 4th-round pick from way back in 2021, played in the SHL as an 18-year-old and fared really well, had some good showings for Sweden on the international scene a couple of times, was a captain for Sweden, I believe, at either the World Juniors or the World Championships, but another guy who, kind of like Pharand, if he was ever going to make it to the NHL and over here in North America, it was going to be as a bottom six penalty killer, defense first type of guy, as even over in the SHL the last few years, Stjernborg, question marks always about his last name, has never really put up a high point total. He had 9 points, 3 goals and 6 assists in 37 SHL games this season. A 5'10", 203-pound forward who's 22 years old. I was keeping him on my radar a couple of years ago when he had some really strong pro seasons at, again, 18, 19 years of age, but hasn't really developed into much of anything offensively to go and complement those really sound defensive abilities. Marcel Marcel maybe is the most interesting one of this group because we've obviously already seen him under the Blackhawks umbrella these last couple of years. After being a 5th-round pick in 2023, he immediately signed an AHL deal to go and join the Ice Hogs and tallied 5 assists in 26 games during his first pro season, had 13 points, 5 goals and 8 assists in 41 games for Rockford this past year. An absolute wrecking ball out there, can staple guys along the board, absolutely drop them. Nice little uptick in offense, 6'4", 243-pound forward. Marcel Marcel is a big boy and only 21 years old. I would say out of all these guys, the one who's most likely to stick around and get an AHL deal would be Marcel Marcel. But I'm guessing, again, that's pretty unlikely to happen at this point in time. And then last but certainly not least is my boy, Big Milton Oscarsson, 6th-round pick in 2023. I knew there was going to be no chance of this guy making it to the NHL, but it's fun to follow along with these later draft pick prospects when they're overseas. Decent year from Oscarsson over in the SHL for a 6'7" center, which is absolutely hilarious. 11 points, 5 goals, and 6 assists as a 22-year-old. Like I said, 6'6", 216-pound center. Not an NHL future. I don't even know how to word that. Not an NHL future in his future, I guess you would say, but not all that surprising of a development. But this is something I wanted to bring up here on the show since I outlined these prospects were looking for ELCs before June 1st, or else they were going to become unrestricted free agents, and the Blackhawks were going to lose their rights. That's what happened to all 4 of these players. We'll see what winds up happening with them in just about a week and a half come July 1st. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. Be on the lookout for my discussion on whether the Blackhawks can pry JJ Peterka from the Buffalo Sabres, as well as Victor Ekland's 2025 NHL Draft Profile. Until then, I'll catch you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.